What do you do when you can't find the records? You're looking for your ancestor in a record set and it's just not there. What on earth do you do? How do you find your ancestor in these records? Well, this was a question that came in from one of our viewers at the Genealogy TV YouTube channel. And so we're going to jump into this question. What do you do when you don't find the records you expect to find? And you have looked high and low and you can't find the records. So let's jump into that, because what that is negative evidence. If you're not finding things, we'll get into all of the details, but if you're not finding it, you're not finding it, right? And so this is what it is and how to do it. That's what we're going to talk about today. And this came from a viewer question, so I appreciate the question. And please, if you have questions, put them in the comment sections. I do try to read them all. This question was, I just finished watching your YouTube video on research notes. My question is, what do you do with negative evidence? I searched the entire 1840 census for a county in New York, but didn't find the ancestor. Do I note that in my research notes or put that somewhere else? So that is a great question. And we're going to get into that in just a second. But if this is your first time here, my name is Connie Knox. Welcome to Genealogy TV. All right, so there is a handout for this, just in case you are interested in the handout. For channel members, you need to be at the information access level. All you have to do is click the join button, and you can join at that level and find the handouts in the membership tab. Patreon. That is another membership option. If you want the handouts emailed to you as we produce them, we send out a notice and that gets emailed to you with the attachment. Or you can find them in the posts on Patreon. That's at patreon.com/genealogy TV. Academy members, they have an all access pass to everything. So they get all of the Academy stuff as well as all the YouTube stuff. So that would be in the appropriate course over there at genealogytv.org. If you're interested, check it out at the /Academy website. Or if you don't want to be a member of anything, you can just purchase it over at genealogytv genealogytv.org/handouts. So with all of that, there's a handout for this as well as most videos I produce. All right, so I appreciate your support. It does help support the channel and these videos. All right, two things that this questioner was asking. What is negative evidence and what do we do with it in our research notes? So we're going to kind of go over both of those today. So evidence, let's just start with the word evidence. That which tends to prove or disprove something, a ground for belief or proof. Something that makes plain or clear an indication or sign. So these are the definitions of evidence. But what I want to point out here is proof or disproof, because this is something that we try to do as genealogists to prove or disprove our hypothesis or our question or our facts. We try to prove them and disprove them equally so that we feel confident that we have proof of the situation. Okay? So what is negative evidence? A type of evidence arising from an absence of a situation or information in extant records where that information might be expected. One of three categories of the genealogical evidence compart with negative search. So that's a lot of information to try and absorb. So let's break it down a little bit. Elizabeth Schoen Mills says in her Evidence Explained book, negative evidence, an inference we can draw from an absence of a situation that should exist under particular circumstances. Okay, she goes on to cite the example of Sherlock Holmes' famed case where the sound of a dog not barking when a burglary occurred. This is not to be confused, by the way, negative evidence is not to be confused with negative findings or the absence of information we hope to uncover. So kind of starting to get a feeling for the difference between negative evidence and negative findings. We'll go on. Negative evidence is the absence of original evidence where we expect it to be after reasonably exhaustive research. Now, that's my own definition because I wanted to simplify it a little bit. Negative evidence is the absence of original evidence where we expect it to be after reasonably exhaustive research. So we'll get into reasonably exhaustive research and what that means here in a minute. Elizabeth Shown Mills goes on to say negative evidence does not mean that the records are missing. So that's something else we need to consider. All right, so what is reasonably exhaustive research? According to the Board for Certification of Genealogists, it is emphasizing original records providing participants information for all evidence that might answer a genealogist's question about an identity, a relationship, or an event or situation. So basically, reasonably exhaustive research is specifically talking about a research question. So think about that. You've got a research question. You're trying to find this guy in 1840 in New York. Where is he? That's your research question, right? So the reasonably exhaustive research is surrounding around that research question, okay? Let's talk about direct, indirect, and negative evidence because they're all evidence. And this is kind of the definitions for direct evidence answers the research question. Indirect typically needs 2 or more records to piece together a conclusion that answers the research question. And negative evidence is the absence of evidence where we expect it to find it after reasonably exhaustive research, as we've discussed. So let's talk about direct evidence and an example for a moment. A research question might be as simple as when was Jane Smith born, and her birth certificate gives us that date. That is direct evidence of the research question. Indirect, right? Remember, it typically takes 2 or more records to piece together to come to a conclusion that answers the research question. For example, let's say the question was, where was Robert Koch born? Well, item number 1 might be the 1900 census in Johnson County, Kansas says he was born in Kansas in April of 1892, and he is the son of Fred and Wilma Koch. Okay. Now, that gives us part of the research question when we were asking where was he born and maybe when was he born. We've got April of 1892, and we find a Bible record, a second record that says that Robert Koch, the son of Fred and Wilma Koch, notes that he was born on April 20th, but the year is smudged. And I actually have a typo here. The question was, when was he born? Okay. So collectively, the 2 of these together, April 1892 plus the 20th of April, we can tie these records together because Fred and Wilma Koch are both named as the parents in these records. So we know we have the right records. We have the full birth date of the 20th of April, 1892. Okay, so that much we know. All right, so negative evidence. Negative evidence is the absence of an original evidence where we expect it to be after reasonably exhaustive research, as we have said. So when we're talking about our question from the viewer, and he says, what do you do with negative evidence? I searched the entire 1840 census for the county of New York, but didn't find my ancestor. So my question is to you, is this negative evidence or is this negative findings? So with the information that I had from the viewer, all I had was I searched the entire 1840 census in New York, but didn't find the ancestor. Negative evidence does not mean that evidence is missing, first of all, but does this mean that the ancestor was not in New York in 1840? Not necessarily. It simply means that the 1840 census record was not found. So that is negative findings for this situation. So when we think about strategies for that reasonably exhaustive research, is this reasonably exhaustive research? No. There are more resources to find, to look for, to prove or disprove that the ancestor was or was not in New York in 1840. So where else could we look for that ancestor in that time period, right? Maybe tax records. city or business directories, if they exist at that time. Now, this is 1840, so they may not exist at this time. Land and property records, right? Wills or probate records might be another option. Vital records, if they exist. County court records might be an option. All platforms such as Ancestry, FamilySearch, WikiTree, MyHeritage, you know, all of them that you could possibly look at. Now, FamilySearch and WikiTree are both free, so you should be looking there for sure. So it just kind of depends on where you are researching. Cemeteries, find a grave, billion graves, those are free. Newspapers, you might be looking in newspapers to see if there's anything there. Also keep in mind that new, at FamilySearch, they have that new experimental full text search. Boy, people are finding a lot of records there. And if you read the comments on the video I did about that full text search, people are like, holy cow, I found so many records. So make sure you're looking there. And I've added the fan club here. So we've created a research plan. Now, plan your research and research your plan. That's what I say. So once done with your research plan and you're still not finding your ancestor in the 1840 time period in New York, is it reasonably exhaustive research? At that point, yes. Once you have kind of gone through everything you could possibly go through, then yes. Do you add this to your research notes? Yes, absolutely. If it is, you know, part of the, if you've done that reasonably exhaustive research, I certainly would. So evidence is evidence. Whether it's negative evidence or not, it is evidence. So write a brief conclusion as to why you thought he or she should have been in the 1840 time period. I would put that in chronological order in your research notes and then note it as negative evidence. So here's an example, a brief kind of example of what your research notes might look like. If they were in the 1830 census, then you would make a note of that. And if they were in the 1850 census, you would make a note of that with all the little details, right? And then I always put negative evidence and places I still need to search or still have questions about in red. So in this case, 1840 census, John Doe is missing from the census. I have searched the entire county and was unable to find him. So, I mean, that's just an example, but you might want to list some of the places that you looked. Now, I'm not a huge fan of research logs, and here's why. Now, the only time I'm a huge fan of research logs is if I'm going to like the family history library or something and I need to like do all that work ahead of time as to what books I'm looking for and what microfilm I wasn't able to look at from home. I will create a research log or a plan for that. But a research log usually is a list of everywhere you have looked. And the problem with that is new records are coming online every day. And if you put in your research log that you looked in a certain place and then all of a sudden you go, oh, I've already looked there, I'm not going to look there again. Well, there could be new records that have come online in that research, in that record collection. And so you might want to look at that again. I personally don't keep research logs. It's just me. The only time I do that is if I'm doing client research, and then I have to, because we have to show where we have been looking. So who, what, where, when, why, and how. You might be asking, why am I not finding this guy in 1840? So you start asking these questions. What was happening in history? There might be a reason why. Could there have been a temporary move out of that area? Was there a family reason to leave? Did someone die and he had to go? Did work take him away? Now I'm going to stop for a moment and go back to that previous comment. Did someone die and he had to go? This is where the fan club research comes in. So if you're researching all of the friends, associates, and neighbors, right, the family as well, you might discover that a father died and he had to go back for a funeral at that time or whatever. Take a look at when that 1840 census was taken. If it was like, I don't remember when 1840, it was probably April-ish in that year. And if somebody died in April of that year, then there might be a reason why that person wasn't there. Okay. Military records might be a clue. So if the person was in the military, they might be gone temporarily. They may be in prison. Immigration, meaning they left. There could be immigration records. Now, immigration with an I means they're arriving. Emigration with an E means they're leaving. And there's usually records in both places. A lot of people forget to look at that emigration records. Did the census taker just miss that person, or did the researcher just miss that person when they were doing the research? So the conclusion I come up with is, we got to do that reasonably exhaustive research. We need to note all of your evidence in your research notes, even negative evidence, if it passes the reasonably exhaustive research test. Plan your research and research your plan, right? And keep asking questions, because it's those questions that kind of give you that critical thinking, that skill that you need to continue to search. Because once you find that you're asking good questions, then it helps lead to other things. Now let's stop for just a second. Here's a tip. If you're looking at probably a later census record and there's that real estate column and you see a value there, you should be asking yourself, do I have the deeds for that? Because if there is in that census record, there's that little, it says $2,500 worth of value of property in the real estate column, go look for the deeds, and that's going to be probably at the county level. So keep asking those questions. It's those great questions that make you a great researcher. And I appreciate the person who sent me that question in the comment sections. Keep them coming, because that helps. If you like that, give me a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. All right, we'll catch you in the next video.